In this video, I'm not going to point any fingers or judge any hearts. I'm just going to share with you my personal story of why I made the decision to stop listening to secular music.
Rocking you up for Jesus Christ with classic style hard rock music and practical Bible teaching.
As a teenager, I had a massive album collection, okay? Maybe you had, or maybe you have one as well. Every single week, man, I'd take a piece of my paycheck and I'd go buy a couple albums. I had them all in alphabetical order. I had them in the plastic sleeves to protect all the artwork, right? This was like my prize thing in life, my treasure. My bedroom was a shrine to all the bands that I loved, right? I read Metal Edge and Circus Magazine and Hit Parader from cover to cover. I read every article, man, every interview. I tore out every picture of every, band that I loved. You couldn't see my wall anywhere. Posters, pictures covered every inch. I went to every concert that came to Indianapolis from like 1980 through 86 or 7. I spent hours, literally all day, many days, sitting in a chair in my bedroom, dropping the needle back, picking it up and going back so I could learn the riff, learn the lick to that song, man. I was so invested in this. I bet I performed over 1,000 air guitar concerts in my bedroom, right? I even hooked up a lighting rig and built things in my bedroom so that I could drop the needle and pretend to be Angus Young or Ace Frehley or Dave Murray or Adrian Smith, right, man? And I was just doing the thing. And with being so into the music, I became fully invested in the culture of heavy metal, sex, drugs, and rock and roll, the whole deal. My entire worldview was shaped by heavy metal. In Romans chapter 12, verse 2, J.B. Phillips translates Paul's words this way: "Don't let the world around you squeeze you into its mold." But that is exactly what I did. 1983 was a really interesting year for me. I talk about it some in a video I created called Maiden God, where I talk about the influence and how God used that band as part of my testimony to actually draw me to Him. I'll put the link to that in the description. I hung out quite a bit that year with a guy named Sam Elshire. It was like a really good friend of mine for a couple of years, and then we kind of fell out. He had a brother who was a youth minister over at the Little Nazarene Church on 38th Street in Anderson, and we started hanging out and going to youth group. Now, this is just part of my world, okay? I was raised in the church. I knew Jesus was Lord. I never stopped believing in Him, but I just really wanted to live for the world. I really wanted to taste all the stuff that the world offered, and I was totally giving myself to that. So, at this time of my life, I have one foot over here in the world doing the party thing, and one foot over here starting to go to youth group and hanging out and learning about God, and I just have this dual thing going on. Well, if you remember the 80s, that was also when we started talking about backward masking and all those kind of things. And this youth minister, who was Sam's brother, cool dude, good guy, loved on the kids, good teacher, all the good things, he started talking about music a lot, and I got really convicted. I already had a whole bunch of internal battles going on in my heart, right? Because I knew some truth from God's Word. I knew that a lot of the things that I was doing and involved in and the music that I was listening to and the culture around it was not Christ-honoring. So the more he talked, the more convicted I got. And they had an album burning session, and I burnt all of my albums. I think I kept just a couple that I rationalized and said, well, these aren't so bad, which is wild. I actually have a memory. I think I kept Van Halen 2. For some reason, I had talked myself into thinking that wasn't as bad. I don't know. It was wild. But anyway, I burned them all. And then guess what? I bought them all back. I remember the first one I bought back, man, I went to Musicland. It was a music store in the mall there in Anderson. I remember walking right down that one side of the store. I knew right where that record was. Judas Priest, Screaming for Vengeance. I looked it up. I said, I love that album at the time. I was like, I gotta have it. So I bought it. And of course, that was like an alcoholic who'd been on the wagon for a long time taking that first drink. I was like, boom, I was all back into it. I bought them all back and then a whole bunch more. Proverbs chapter 22, verse 6 says this: "Train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it." Of course, that's just a principle. We all know people who were raised in the church, raised in the Lord, and they walked away from the Lord and didn't live for Him. But that principle is coming home to roost in my heart. I had been raised in the church. I had been raised around the scriptures. I had a lot of teaching in my heart. I had a lot of people around me who were authentic, wonderful examples of Christ followers. And so even though I was immersed in this whole metal culture, worldly culture, living for the world, man, I had a battle going on in my heart. 2 Corinthians chapter 7, verse 10, the Apostle Paul says, "Godly sorrow brings repentance that leads to salvation. Now, the leading to salvation part is awesome, but I'll tell you what, godly sorrow stinks, man. It is hard. I know now, looking back on it, it was the love of God that wouldn't let me go, that just poured on the conviction, that brought on that sorrow, that brought me to the bottom of the barrel. But man, in the midst of it, it was so hard. Around 1987, when I hit bottom, I ran to my grandma. And I ran to my grandma because she had loved me unconditionally my whole life. Every single conversation included, "Braddy boy, I love you." And it was just so authentic. And she loved Jesus with all of her heart every day out loud. She taught several Bible studies a week. She was always in the Word. She ate, drank, and slept Jesus. I mean, she just loved him 24/7. And I knew it. And I saw in her the joy and the meaning and the purpose and all the things that I wanted in my life. So I went to her. She listened to me pour my heart out. She was so gracious. She was so kind. And she said, "Okay, Brad, listen." Actually, she always called me Braddy. "Braddy, you got to get out of Anderson. You got to leave this town and all these influences and all these peers who are just tearing you down." And she was right. She said, "You need to go out to Wichita where your uncle is." My uncle, her son, be my mom's brother anyway, he was real involved in ministry, and the whole family was. And so I got on a plane and I left Anderson, landed in Wichita, Kansas, and was embraced by this whole community of Christ followers out there. They loved me unconditionally, beautifully. There was such a strong community of faith out there, and they just welcomed me in. And I have said so many times that I had felt like an old dried up crusty sponge, man. And when I landed in Wichita, I felt like I got dipped in a bucket of liquid Jesus love. It was just awesome, man. And so anyway, they loved me into the Lord. I fell in love with Jesus and his word, and I just got immersed in that, man. And I lived out there for 9 months. And the whole time I was out there, I didn't listen to any secular music. I was introduced to all this CCM, Michael Card and Rich Mullins and the Altar Boys and Whiteheart and all these bands, man. I know very little of it. None of that really was metal, but I was just loving this whole summer and the whole experience of it. I did discover while I was out there at the Christian bookstore, Saint, Time's End. And I was like, oh, I can be a Christian now, man. Because that album rocks. And it was like, this is awesome. After about 9 months in Wichita, man, I said, I just got to go home. It's time for me to turn the page. You know, I'm not going to live here my whole life. I need to get back home and just get to living for the Lord and move on with my life. So I got home, and I remember I went into my bedroom, and guess what was right there waiting on me? My album collection. Thousands of dollars of albums. And I knew what I had to do. I got them out, took them all out of the plastic sleeves. My brother was there, and I started ripping the covers and busting the albums one by one. You ever tried to break a vinyl album? They're not easy to break, dude. I broke hundreds of them. My brother flipped out when I got to this one album. Mostly I had hard rock and metal, but I had Purple Rain, and I went to break it, and my brother's like, no, not he was freaking out. And I remember I got real aggressive. I mean, I was intense. This was you can imagine how intense of a moment this was. And so I put him against the wall. Not I wasn't going to hurt him or anything. I was just like, Brent, because he wanted me to give it to him. I said, Brent, this is the stuff that has had a stranglehold on my life. This has been a God for me. This is something that has been a terrible source of darkness in my life, okay? And I said, how in the world can I give this to anybody? You go out and buy it, that's your business, but I can't give this. And I broke it. It was wild. It was a massive line in the sand. It was turning a huge page in my the story of my life. I didn't listen to any secular music outside of just being someplace where somebody had a radio on or whatever, but I didn't intentionally listen to any for like 10 years. I met my wife, Kelly, in 89. Then we got married in 91, and she had grown up in a world where she loved music. She was she still is a wonderful singer. Her favorite singer was Sandy Patty, okay? 180 degrees opposite of metal. And when we met, she had no idea about the metal side of me because I had just completely abandoned and walked away from that, and I pretty much only listened to CCM. We dated for a couple years. We got married. She brought a lot of balance back into my life just with her perspective because she never had the hang up with music that I did. She loved music. She loved singing for the Lord, but she listened to the radio, knew all the hits from when we were kids, all the stuff that I, grew up with, she grew up with. But she was just like, people are people, and people write songs about their life, and it's no big deal. And some songs, if they're not good, you just don't listen to them. And some songs, if they are, you enjoy them. And, so honestly, she really helped me have a little more balanced perspective on that stuff. But still, because it had been such a God for me, I just had to stay away from it for a long time. I love the music, love to create the parodies and all those things, but I need to fill my heart with music that honors Jesus. That's just what I need. And when I listen to all those other things, probably because of all the memories that I had associated with the lifestyle and all the things, I just don't go there anymore. I just don't need it. I don't have any problem dropping in and watching a live performance of The Troop soper or something like that occasionally. Just the other day I was watching Thunderstruck because I was thinking about maybe doing a parody of that here in the future. You know, for those kinds of reasons, I'll drop in and listen to that. But that's not my diet. That's not what I listen to steady because of my journey and metal's role in my journey and the way that I came out of it and all of those things. Romans 12:2 in the NIV reads like this: "Do not conform any longer to the pattern of this world." And for me, when I read that verse in this context, I think, dude, I don't want to immerse myself in the worldview of secular rock anymore. I don't want to do anything that would move me toward being conformed to worldly ways. But be transformed. Proactively do this on purpose. Be transformed by the renewing of your mind. I want to set my mind, or set before my mind, sounds and words that glorify Jesus and that build me up and make me strong. So it's not just that I don't want to listen to this, it's that I want to fill my mind with godly things. So what's your story? What's your journey been like with music? If you're part of the Pastor Brad Rocks family, obviously music is a big part of your life. I'd love to hear your story with secular metal and what your thoughts are on all that. This is my story, and hopefully it helps you understand a little bit better where I'm coming from with all of that. In the end, I just want to live out 1 Corinthians 10:31. Whatever you do, whether you eat or drink, do it all for the glory of God.